recently, Stephen Sondheim passed away, and he has such an I mean, where do you even begin with someone as untouchable and just a legend? And you put up an amazing story on your social media page, but I would love for you to like touch on that, or any other memory you have of working with Mr. Sondheim, and just your career as a young person. And
Absolutely. I think it's, it's so interesting. I hadn't really told not many people knew that I got that opportunity to work with Steve. I think I was 20 years old. I was a junior in college. I was spending the semester in New York with the Duke in New York Arts group. And it was a new kind of arts program that my university had created. And it was a small group of people, and we were all charged with having these internships. And we had to find our own internships at that time. There was no pipeline to internships. I can't quite recall how I got to Playwrights Horizons. But there I was with Ira Weitzman and Andre Bishop, who are now, just anecdotally, they helm the Lincoln Center Theater, which has done all War Horse and Gorgeous Revival of South Pacific, all of those incredible plays over the last decades. But at the time, Andre and Ira were at Playwrights, and Playwrights was far west 42nd Street in a kind of rinky-dink kind of old townhouse building, and the theater itself was probably no wider than the community room that you're in right now at Cape Breton. But on that stage had premiered Sunday in the Park with George and all of Bill Finn's plays. And so I got there and met Ira, and he showed me this huge wall of basically musicals, unsolicited musicals that had been submitted, and they were all in manila envelopes, and they all had cassette tapes. Do you remember cassette tapes?
Oh, yes, of course.
So there were it was like this huge wall, and it was just shoved with all of these musicals. He was like, so what you're going to do, Dani, while you're here, is you're going to read all of those, and you're going to get back to the writers, and you're going to let me know if any of these is any good. And I was like, I don't know the first thing about determining whether or not anything's any good. What do I know? Well, what do you mean? And he's like, okay. So he then opened his drawer of his desk, and he pulled out cassette tapes of Bill Finn's shows, of Stephen Sondheim's shows. And he gave me the accompanying script. And he said, so this weekend, go home and read and listen to all of these. And then Monday, we'll talk about structure. And then Tuesday, you'll just get started. I was like, oh, great. Okay. So off I went. And I was like, okay, I think I understand what he's talking about. He's talking about structure. He's talking about an opening number. He's talking about a closing number. He's talking about characters. He's talking about themes. I think I understand what he's saying. So I came back and said, are you talking about this? And he said, yes, you've got it. He said, the opening number needs to tell you X, 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 and X, right? You need to know these things about the character. Closing of Act 1 needs to do X, 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 and X, right? So basically, you can flip from the beginning of the script to the end of Act 1 to the middle of Act 2, and you'll know if it's worth continuing to read. And so that's what I did. Wow. And so maybe in like 100 musicals, I pulled out one that was probably worth the read. But I always got back to people, and that was when we were typing, typing on a typewriter, and I was sitting at a card table in Ira's office typing away all these response letters back to these lovely writers. And then he came in one day and he said, listen, Steve needs, and I didn't know who Steve was. I was like, Steve must be somebody else in the building, Ira, Steve, Andre, all the people. So it was very funny, but that's how I became Sondheim's audition intern for the original company of Into the Woods. Into the Woods was going to do its out-of-town tryout, in San Diego, and so they were putting it together, as Steve wrote. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I became his intern. And so here was the direction from Ira. go to, I think we were auditioning at the Walter Kerr. Something tells me, that, it's back when you would do auditions in theaters.
Theater. Wow.
When people would like walk on the stage and audition, it was like,
Wow.
and go to the Walter Kerr, and he will be there, and don't speak to him until he speaks to you. And you know me, Trish, I talk. I'm like, hey, how you doing? I'll talk to anybody.
Hi, Dani.
So I had to wait. I had to wait a couple of days before he talked to me.
Wow.
Yeah, and he knew I was there. He looked over his shoulder at me when I got there and nodded, and he knew I was there. And that was it. And I was like, I guess I'll just sit here and wait. James Lapine was very, very friendly. James Lapine is a very visual director, and he knew that I was a part of a larger program of people. And he said, hey, Dani, do you think that young people in your program would be interested in helping me with blocking for the show? Right?
Wow.
And I'll order pizza, and I can do a talk back with everybody. I was like 100%, like absolutely everybody would be interested. So there were 3 nights where we went down to what was called West Bath, which was a big, huge artists building where we used to rehearse big shows because it had this gigantic space sort of in the middle of the building. And we went to West Bath, and we all wore signs around our necks, like Prince 1, Prince 2, Prince 3, Cinderella, Jack. And James just like moved everybody around. And his assistants would record everything on the plot maps, and we moved through numbers. And Steve's associate, Paul Ford, who's done all of Steve's musicals, was in the room playing the songs. Right, like playing. I mean, it was insane, right? And James couldn't have been more generous or more wonderful. All of this to say that it was a wild experience. It was just
being so young and experiencing that. Do you feel like that was just such a huge lesson for you to continue to forge ahead in the business and like learning so much about? I mean, does it just to this day
I think
help you?
You know what I think? I don't know how you feel like about this. I feel like the experience was so big, and I didn't know how to see myself in it. I didn't have the greatest degree of self-assurance or self-esteem as a young person. I really floundered a lot as a young person for a lot of reasons. And I think the whole time that I was doing it, while I was doing it, I was like, I promise you, I was like really showing up and really good. But there was a part of me all the time was like, no, you don't really deserve to be doing this. Ira was wrong. He shouldn't have given you this opportunity. He didn't know what he was doing. I had that kind of conversation going on in my head. So I guess what I would say is, if someone gives you the opportunity to do something like that, it's probably because they believe you can handle it. So even if you don't think, right, try to listen to that person outside of you who is seeing something in you that you might not be seeing yet.
Yeah.
Right? And that doesn't mean you have to get all like cocky or anything. It just means that if you are that young person, as I was, who's really kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing, just try to hear the signals, try to see those signals, lean on them if you can, instead of listening to those voices inside your own head, which can be pretty not so good for you. I didn't realize that the takeaway was as profound as it was until I started doing the work myself, right? And I could see the difference. Like when I would go into auditions subsequent to that, when I returned to New York after college and started doing theater myself as an actor, I just thought everybody was as nice as Steve and James in the audition room. And they weren't necessarily.
Right.
I was like, where's the handshake? Where's the, how are you doing?
Right.
Where's the, We're so happy and so honored that you came in. And they did that with everybody. It didn't matter if the person was a star already or just someone rising up. They had this kind of just a grace about them and an appreciation
Yeah.
for all of us doing this. And I think Trish, what was really cool, when Steve died, we saw this like
Ooh,
abundance of beautiful tributes and testimonies about him.
it was incredible.
Uh-huh. And
All
and
over the
it
world.
makes perfect sense
Yeah,
because
yeah,
he was
yeah,
utterly that guy.
yeah,
Every single human he interacted with, he was that guy. So
yeah.
we all have these moments and these stories. Uh, and then when Steve, this a few, about a week or so, what was it, a week or so before Steve died was the first preview of Company, and I was
You
there.
were there, that's right. And didn't
Mhm.
she acknowledged Steve, right?
Well,
I'm calling him
yeah,
Steve.
first of all, she did a speech. It were curtain speeches for like the first 25 minutes of the evening, which was incredible. And the whole cast came out before the show just to, be back. And then Patty spoke. The beautiful director spoke. She's so marvelous. And then Patty talked about Steve, and then I think people just applauded for like minutes and minutes on end for Steve. And Patty just stood there staring at him. And just that moment alone, I was like, we are in this together.
Mm-hmm.
We who are privileged enough to take the journey of being performing artists, whether we're writers, directors, actors, whatever. What a beautiful tribe of people this is.
Yeah.
That this journey has obviously been taken together. And so I'm looking back like over 30 something years to that moment where she was on the stage and he was sitting right there, and remembering that and witnessing
What has
this.
been a lifelong relationship, and you must. I mean, if I
I
had,
was like,
I would have been so emotional. I would have just been
I was like,
flipping
oh
out.
my God,
Like,
oh
what
my
is
God,
happening? Yeah.
like beautiful. And then she did her number, Ladies to Lunch, in the second act. And the audience, there was a huge, like 3-minute ovation.
Mm-hmm.
It died down. Then it went up again. Like, it was insane. And then it died down. And then when it died down finally the second time, Steve called out, "Brava, Patty." And then the whole audience went berserk again.
Oh my God. And do you have any? I mean, you spoke so beautifully and you said so many beautiful things. Is there anything you'd like to like close this conversation out on? We have the Yoko program here, and um, and I feel like they're just such a big example of like who's coming up in the future, and you know,
They are the future, and they'll be each other's collaborators too,
yeah,
right? Like just like you and I are each other's collaborators,
yeah,
we are, right. So it is, again, it's about building those foundational relationships with our peers
yeah.
and being kind and respectful. We're all very vulnerable in the work all the time, no matter who we are in the room. Everybody has their vulnerability. And then I think like when you are feeling super insecure, just kind of like listen to the facts, pay attention to what's actually happening so
Mhm.
that you can attach and do your best work, because we do have, demons in our heads, and they can
Mhm.
undermine
Right.
our success. So if you're feeling like those demons are coming alive, just put yourself back in the room, be with the people you're with, allow yourself to lean on them a little. And I don't mean like lean on them and like I'm so insecure I can't, but
Right.
lean on what's happening. Just go into the work, do the work with these beautiful people, and it will carry you forward.